Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I'll be talking about the third paragraph on our slide, paragraph number 78, and there's quite a lot to say, so I'm going to try and say it as concisely and accurately as possible. But if at any point you want me to go over it in class, please make a note of it and let me know, so that way I can address any of your concerns. The first thing that I want us to focus on in paragraph 78 is the first line, okay? And it is an interesting claim that in the Jewish tradition, nature, for one of the first times in the history of religions, demythologizes nature and divinity, okay? So for a long time, in the most primitive understandings of gods, goddesses, and nature weren't properly or formally distinguished necessarily. So you had sort of this incredible pantheism that in some worldviews still exists today. However, Judaism makes a decisive break with that. It does draw a distinction between the natural world and divinity, and it does so in a very creative way. From the very first book of the Hebrew Bible in Genesis, we're given an interesting framework to think about the natural world or the planet and all that we call the ecosphere and its relation to the divine, and it goes something like this. It's construed along the lines of a relationship of a creator, and it's not many gods, it's just one creator God and God's creation. And so already we have a decisive break from primitive religion, which didn't see a distinction, but with Judaism, we certainly do, where there is a creator God, and that God has his creation. In this interesting turn of events, though, the pinnacle of the creation is said to bear a kind of resemblance to the creator who made them. So I'm referring to us, and I'm referring to the fact that persons bear the image and likeness of God the Creator. So the pinnacle of the creation emulates the Creator, which then, as paragraph 78 calls for, actually allows us to discover and rediscover the creation as a gift, as a mystery, okay? And it allows properly for an encounter to take place. So that's the first point that I wanted to make. That's a really strong distinction, and I want you to know that. The next thing that I want you to know was that the pinnacle of this creation is said to re-encounter or rediscover the creation in which that creature dwells. Okay, so that's really important, and we'll talk about what kind of stewardship, responsibility, and freedom is called upon of that creature to take care of its home, where it dwells. Okay. I then wanted to say a little bit about what the trend in demythologizing nature has come to. And we call that program, what we call the systematic demythologizing of nature, we call that science, right? So in all the mysteries of the planet, we are trying to get at what underlies every single thing. What's common to all of them? Did it have a common origin in the Big Bang? What does it look like? And what accounts also, that's at the bottom level. But scientists are also concerned with the top level. So what accounts for distinctions between species? What accounts for one kind of thing versus another? And what are the properties that sort of emerge from these large composite aggregates of quarks, atoms, and elements, and things like that. Okay. Well, so that's what science does. And if you apply science, if you take on a scientific worldview of the world, it can actually enlarge in your sense of mystery. It can enlarge. Did I say enlarge in? That's a terrible thing to say. That's not a word. Sorry about that. So, science is sort of that method that we use to get at what's underlying everything, what's underneath it all, to help us understand the natural world better. Now, Laudato Si says, and I've gone over it before, that when we when we look at the natural world only through a technological scientific worldview, that's a problem, because it does in some way, and I can talk about why, it does in some way take away from the mystery of things. When I would argue doesn't have to, but what seems to happen is this. Technology is a tool, and we can control tools. So the more that we apply this technological worldview to the planet, the more we think we can control it. And that's not totally a bad thing. I like to know I like to know that the weather outside is going to be a certain way. I like to know that I have tires that can handle the snow so I can come to work and talk to all of you. That's all very important. But if I, and this is the operative word here, if I only have a vision of the planet that is scientific, it might lead me to think that I can control every aspect of it because I can come to understand it in a particular model. That's called science. When in reality, it's much more complex than that. The tradition says that the creation is a kind of gift. It's a kind of mystery that is meant to be understood by living in a relationship to it, right? And I gave the example that if I were to go home and say to Mrs. Revelis, I've got a program that tells me exactly how you're going to speak, exactly what you're going to react to if I say something, every single joke you're ever going to say and ever did. If I say, this program will tell me everything about you, no matter what. It knows you. It's the program. I scientifically understand you. I think Mrs. Revelis is going to say something not very approving of that, right? Because even though in some way I have an understanding of that person, I actually don't know who she is at that point, right? And I don't think that's really fair to characterize a person that way. And nobody does, but it can also be applied to the planet too. So it's really helpful to think about the planet scientifically. It can, in fact, enlarge our sense of awe, wonder, and mystery. I think that's true. And I think to the attentive scientist, that's what it actually does. And that's why I showed you the images of the Webb telescope. If I only adopt a technological scientific modular view of the universe, though, I will tend to lose sight of that mystery of what it actually is. I mean, we can see that with scientific laws today undergoing name changes because they're not considered to be constants anymore. Take gravity, for example, right? Or the law of natural selection. Or, for example, what's another one? That just last week, that the center of the Earth was rotating in a certain direction, and it's possibly stopping to turn, to revolve in the opposite direction. Okay? So things like that. So right, a technological worldview doesn't augment my sense of mystery if I take it to mean that there's no longer any relationship that I can have or take to the creation, towards the natural world, okay? And I think that's where Carl Sagan runs aground, okay? I think that's where the issue develops. And I can sense that maybe some people would want to push back and say, no, I don't buy what you're selling. I don't think that science and technology have done that. I would say, well, I don't really have to prove my point because of this. The Romantics emerge, the Romantics in literature and in various movements and cultural movements in the last 3 centuries evolve. If you look at it, they really do evolve in response to technological advance. They do. So no one can doubt, no one can deny the fact that more harm has been done to the planet in the last 2 centuries than any period in history. And that's strongly correlated with the pace or the rate at which we can destroy it. That is so factual. So I really don't have to prove my point. The person who disagrees actually has to prove their point, that there isn't a connection there. And I have lots of papers and resources I could share with you to show that. So, Mr. Revelis is against science. No, I didn't say that. I'm all for science. I'm pro-science. Just no scientists, or no, I shouldn't say that. There are some. Science can't just be the only perspective, though, through which we understand and interpret the natural world. There's more to it than that. It's like getting the laws of science confused with the law of, with nature itself. Okay, nobody wants to do that. Okay, science makes use of math to develop models to see the universe, but it's not nature actually. Okay, I don't live in harmony with the law of gravity, which is now a theory, by the way. I don't commune with the mathematical laws that describe force with respect to gravity. I just live in the world. Okay, I live on the planet, and I know what it means to have gravity. Okay, so those two things are different. All right. So again, if you have any questions about what the number 78 is talking about, come see me. Okay, but just to underscore the two words that that jump out. Okay, that we've talked about one, we're going to talk about the other later. Myth or demythologizing, right? We're going to talk about, we talked about a little bit now, and then freedom we'll talk about later. But look at the last line. What does Pope Francis say is the actual myth? He says it's progress. Okay, it's unlimited material progress, right? And that's what I was getting at with the standing reserve comment 2 paragraphs ago, to see the world as this private sandbox for unlimited resource availing, right? And he's saying that's the actual myth, is that this is all just here for us and that it's always going to be. Yesterday when I was trying to demonstrate my point and people said, well, Mr. Velis, you're really old and you still read paper books and things like that. That's like killing trees. I have a device here which makes use of no trees. But it's like, well, yeah, but it makes use of all kinds of precious metals and takes electricity to run. And so it's not completely carbon neutral at all. And so, every generation is tasked with evaluating what needs to be done and how we can create a more sustainable frame for living. And we'll talk about sustainability tomorrow. But I think the thing that I would say to all of you who are part of Gen Z is that it's an incredibly fortunate time to live, where the people that have paved the way, technologically speaking, are now reflecting on ways of saving the planet rather than destroying it. But at the same time, it's not to go down the rabbit hole that nature can only be viewed scientifically if just put to the right uses. That wouldn't save it either. The issue has to do with control. And if the Christians are right, if the Jewish tradition is right, that creation is a gift as mystery, it can't be controlled. It can't be controlled. And so then, therefore, any tools that you make the only interpretive key are going to fail. They're going to fail. And so that would be the main point that I'm trying to drive home today. So thanks for listening. And again, feel free to raise any questions tomorrow or whenever you'd like. Thanks.